The space station floated in the dark like a wounded animal, full of broken lights and cold silent ships. Came and went, but no one stayed longer than they had to, because this place was cursed. Not by ghosts, but by something worse, the galaxy's deadliest. Warrior walked these halls, and her name was whispered like a warning. Thalarish was tall with silver armor that never had a single scratch. Her boots made no sound, but everyone knew when she was near. Her eyes burned like stars, ready to explode. She had no friends, no past, no mercy, only orders and silences. Was a human engineer sent to fix broken reactors. He had no idea who Thalara was. No one told him, because they assumed he would be gone before she noticed him. He worked alone in a small room where the walls groaned and wires sparked. He was used to danger, but this station felt different, colder, sharper, like something watched him through the steel. He walked to the mess hall one evening, his arms sore from lifting parts, his uniform stained with dust. He wanted water, and maybe something warm, but the room was nearly empty. Only a few soldiers sat at the back, speaking in low tones, and at the center of the room stood Thalaragus. Did not know her. He only saw a woman standing, still staring at nothing. Her armor shimmered with light from the flickering ceiling. She looked more like a statue than a soldier. He passed close to her, reached for a cup, and saw her eyes shift for a moment. They met his. He smiled, trying to be polite. He said, "Hey, you have really nice eyes." The room froze. One soldier dropped his spoon. Someone whispered no before he could blink. Thalara moved her hand, slapped him hard across the face. He stumbled back. More shocked than hurt, she stood there, arms still in the air, eyes wide, but something strange flickered on her face, a blush. A real honest blush that reached all the way to her ears. She turned fast and walked out, leaving the silence behind her. Just touched his cheek. It stung, but not as much as the way everyone now stared at him. He asked, "What was that? Who is she?" Soldier walked over, eyes full of fear, and said, "You just told Death herself. She has nice eyes. You should leave." Now just laughed a little, not sure if it was a joke. The soldier did not laugh later. In his room, Jace sat on his bunk, thinking. Her face played in his mind. Not the slap, not the armor, but the way she looked confused for a moment. Like no one had ever said something kind to her before. He was tired, but curious. He pulled out his pad and searched her name. Thalara files were locked, but some old stories still leaked through. A girl taken by the warlords at age 5, trained to kill before she could read. First mission at 11:32. Kills by 12 promoted. By 14, feared by fleets known for no mercy, and no Kestis. Blinked. This woman had ended wars with just her hands. She had once walked into a room full of enemies and walked out alone, and still she blushed when someone said something nice. Next day he returned to the control room, worked on systems, trying not to think about her, but she kept appearing in his thoughts. Her eyes, her silence, her blush. When he left for the hallway, he saw her again. She stood at the corner watching him, not moving, not speaking, just watching. He paused, unsure if he should speak again. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she was planning to cut off his head. But instead he just nodded and said, "Thanks for not breaking my neck." She tilted her head almost like she was trying to understand the sentence, then turned and walked away again. That night someone knocked on his door. He opened it. No one was there, but on the floor sat a small metal case inside. It was a repair tool he had been missing. Stared at it, confused, wondering who returned it. Maybe one of the techs, but none of them liked him enough to help. Maybe he looked down the hall. It was empty, but something told him he was not alone, not really far above in the stations. Command deck. Thalara stood with arms crossed, watching a screen that showed Jace working in silence. Her heart beat a little faster, her mind full of noise. She had faced monsters, machines, rebels, traitors, but no one had ever said she had nice eyes. And no one had ever made her feel like her armor was too heavy, not until that strange soft human walked in and smiled. Like she was just a person, not a weapon, not until he saw her not as Death, but as someone worth seeing. And now she could not stop thinking about him. The slap was still fresh in his memory, and his cheek still burned a little, but what stayed longer was the look in her eyes right after it happened, like she had done something she did not expect. Like maybe she was not supposed to feel anything. Jace walked down the corridor with his repair kit held tight in one hand. No one spoke to him now, not even the ones who used to nod when passing by, their eyes held something new, a strange mix of fear and pity, like he had touched something sacred or cursed. He reached the broken relay hub and began his work. Wires hissed and sparks leaped out as he opened the panel. He muttered to himself, focusing on the task, but his mind drifted again to Thalarash. Had not reported him, not punished him further, not even looked his way since the slap. But that silence was louder than shouting. It wrapped around him like a storm about to break. Later that evening, the mess hall was even quieter than before. A few soldiers sat huddled Near the back, one of them called out to Jace in a low voice, "Hey human, you still alive?" After yesterday's raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, still breathing, we either." Soldier shook his head. "You should leave now, before she changes." Jace frowned. "She already slapped me, that's the worst of it, right?" The soldier leaned in. "No." She hesitated. "That's what's wrong. She never hesitates. She once ended a rebellion by herself, and she did not blink once. But with you," she paused. Another voice joined from the shadows. "They're watching her now. The commanders. She's not allowed to hesitate." Jace felt cold crawl up his spine. What happens if she does? They make her choose one thing to kill, the cause the hesitation, or lose everything she has that night. Jace returned to his bunk and found something strange again. Another small metal case. This time it held food, a sealed ration, warmer than the others. He opened it and stared at the label. It was from Thalera's private stock. No one else had access. Ith sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the meal, then looked toward the hallway again. Empty again. Silence somewhere deep in the command chamber. Thalara stood before her superiors, her hands behind her back, her face like stone. They showed her. A screen paused at the moment Jace complimented her. Then the moment she slapped him, and most importantly, the few seconds right after the hesitation. The commander spoke flatly. "Do you know what this means?" She nodded without blinking. "Then you know what must be done." Another nodded. "Finish it, or we finish both of you. Your loyalty is under rebuke." Thalara walked out without speaking, her mind full of silence and static. The kind that hurts more than sound. The next morning, Jace was called to fix the cooling systems near the command center. He arrived early, tools in hand, but when he turned the corner, he found Thalara waiting for him. Alone, his heart jumped a little. He stopped and raised both hands. "You know I bruise easy, right?" She did not smile. She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "I'm supposed to destroy you." Jace lowered his hands, not surprised, just quiet. She stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "If I don't, they will destroy me." He nodded slowly and said, "Well, I guess we're both in trouble." Then she looked at him like he had just spoken a different language. Then she took out a small chip and placed it in his hand. "What's this?" he asked. "Hey, way out." She turned and walked away again, her steps fast, her back tense like she might change her. Jace looked at the chip, then slipped it into his pouch and got back to work, hands moving without thinking. But his heart was racing. She could have killed him just now, but she didn't, and instead she gave him a way to escape. Night, he sat near the engine bay watching the stars from a small window. The chip was still in his pocket, but he had not used it yet. Something held him back. Maybe it was the memory of her eyes. Not when she was angry, but when she was confused. Maybe it was the way she stood too straight, like she was always on guard, even when no one else was around. Or maybe it was the fact that someone like her, someone with the power to break planets, was quietly protecting him from a war he did not even understand. For now he would wait just a little longer, because something told him her story was not finished yet, and somehow he was part of it, now whether he liked it or not. The engine bay hissed with heat, and soft echoes. Metal plates clicked and pulsed under the ship's breath, but Jay sat still on the grated floor with his back to the wall. The chip she gave him rested in his palm, glowing faint blue, like a quiet promise he could run now, disappear into deep space, never look back. But he didn't, because something about her didn't feel finished. Her voice, her stare, her touch of silence, it all stayed in his mind. So he asked around, not directly, but with care, whispering when no one listened, speaking in riddles like a fool or a spy. An old mechanic told him a tale over lukewarm water, they say. Thalara wasn't born, she was made child of blood and battle, raised by the Iron Warlords in a pit, not a home. Her first friend was a blade, her first word was survive. Others whispered she had no family, no past, her heart replaced by war, her mind stripped of dreams. But Jace didn't believe that not all of it. Someone who blushed could not be all steel. One night he caught her alone again. She stood outside the training chamber, helmet off, face turned toward the starseat. Walked slow, careful not to spook her. She didn't look at him, but she said softly, "You should not be near me." He smiled a little, never been good at following smart advice. Her fingers twitched like she wanted to reach for her weapon. But didn't she? Closed her eyes and said, "Why do you speak to Majachi?" Shrugged. "Maybe because you haven't killed me yet, maybe because I think you don't want to." She opened her eyes, then looked down at her armored hand. "This hand ended 5,000 lives, maybe more, and you stand close, like it means nothing." He looked at her then, not her armor, not her rank, but her tired shoulders, her shaking breath. Her shadow stretched by the hallway light. "That hand also returned my tool, and left food outside my door." Her jaw tightened. "You should forget that too." Late she turned away, her voice low again. "I do not know how to be anything else. I was trained to feel nothing, but you felt something when I spoke." That she went still again. A long moment passed, then she spoke. The warlords taught us to kill the weak, then they made us the strongest. We weren't allowed to laugh or rest or speak unless spoken to. Feelings were distractions. He stepped closer, his voice soft. You ever wonder what kind of person you'd be without them? She looked at him then, eyes deep and sharp, like glass in moonlight. I don't know. I never had a chance to find out. Jace sat on the bench beside her, not too close, but not far away, just enough. So she knew he wasn't afraid. You still can. You're not just their weapon anymore. Long silence followed, but it was not empty. It was heavy, full of things not yet said. Later, returned to his quarters, the chip still unused now felt heavier than ever. He sat at his console, scrolling through encrypted logs. He had stolen while pretending to fix a panel. He found one marked Operation Sleeping Dagger. It was about Thalare. Said she was being watched, evaluated, and if her emotional drift continued, she would be replaced or removed. She wasn't just in danger, she was on a ticking clock. He gripped the chip harder, his heart thumping with anger and fear. They had turned her into a ghost, into a weapon, and now they feared she might become human next day. The lights flickered across the station, warning of incoming inspection vessels. High Command was arriving to check Thalara's performance. Everyone stood straighter, walked faster, tried to hide every error, but Jace watched her. She walked slower, eyes harder, jaw set, like she knew exactly what was coming. She passed him once and slipped something into his hand, a data crystal. He looked at her, but she kept walking. No words. No nod. Later, alone, he opened the crystal. Inside were video logs, audio files, training records, and one single private message recorded by her. If you're hearing this, I am no longer in control of what happens to me. They won't allow change, not for someone like me, but you're different. You saw me, not just the armor. If I fall, do not forget me, please. Remember, I treat Jace. Sat there for a long time, the glow of the screen washing over him, as the sounds of drills and shouting echoed down the corridor. He looked out the small window toward the stars, and made a quiet promise. If she was brave enough to change, he would be brave enough to fight for it. Asterisk, the inspection vessel arrived like a blade. Through silk its sharp edges gleamed under the artificial light of the outer ring. Dozens of officers in black stepped out in perfect silence. Each one trained to detect weakness, each one loyal to control, not truth. Flora stood tall near the command chamber, her armor polished, her eyes steady. But her breath moved slower than usual, just enough for someone like Jace to notice from behind, hidden between stacks of supply crates. Jace watched the new arrivals step past with cold eyes. He was not supposed to be here. He should have left by now, but something deeper kept his feet in place, something he could not name. Inside the chamber, a meeting began, voices firm and clipped. They asked Thalara questions about mission numbers, performance cycles, weapons reports, all things. She answered without pause until one officer leaned forward and asked, Do you have any ongoing emotional attachments that may hinder your role? The room went quiet. Thalara replied no, with eyes like steel, but her fingers curled tight. The officer tapped on the pad, then showed a still image of Jace in the hallway smiling at her. Then another of her standing near his room, and then the food case left by his door. You hesitated, the officer said only. Once she replied, that is enough for removal, the officer snapped. We cannot allow one of our finest assets to be compromised by a lesser being. You will terminate the human, or you will be replaced. She did not flinch. She only said, give me the time, and I will handle it outside the chamber. Jace hid behind the wall, but the words echoed clear as glass. In his mind, terminate the human. He stepped back, breath caught between his teeth. He had known it might come to this, but hearing it out loud still froze his blood. He did not return to his bunk. He wandered the lower levels instead, half in shadow, half in thought. That night, she came to him again. Height was in the unused cargo bay, staring at a cracked panel, pretending to work, when her voice cut through the silence. You heard them, didn't you? He turned slowly. Her armor glowed, faint in the dark. Yeah, every word. She stepped closer, face calm, but her voice trembled under the surface like fire behind ice. They gave me a choice, kill you, or be erased from the ranks. Everything I built, gone in a second. He looked at her and asked, do you want to be part of them still? Her breath hitched high. Don't know what else to be. He stepped forward slowly, until only one pace remained between them. You don't have to decide right now, but I'm not running, not unless you want me to. She shook her head, and for the first time her voice cracked out. Don't want to hurt you then. Don't. She looked away, but her hand moved toward him, slow, careful, unsure, until it touched his arm just for a second. He reached into his pouch and placed the crystal she gave him back into her palm. Your message reached me. You tried, now let me try too. That moment lasted only heartbeats, but it felt longer than any orthon. Voices came down the hall, guards calling her name. High Command, waiting for a report. Turned to go, her hand tight around the crystal. The next day a public drill was called. All soldiers required to attend. Jace stood at the back, helmet on, disguise in place, but his eyes stayed locked on Hershey, stood at the center motionless, then was handed a blade by the lead officer. They called him forward by Nemesis froze the order had come. She was supposed to end him in front of everyone. He stepped onto the platform, heartbeat, wild hands open, no weapons. Thalara looked at him, and for a second, the air itself stopped. Then she lifted the blade, but instead of striking, she drove it into the ground beside him hard and deep. I will not do this, she said loud, and clear gasps rippled through the soldiers. The officer stepped forward. You refuse your orders. I refuse to kill someone who made me want to live. Then you are a traitor, the officer declared. So be it, she replied. Chaos broke loose, alarms blared, weapons raised, but Thalara moved, first grabbing Jace and leaping into the crowd, knocking guards aside with fierce precision. Jace ran beside her, not knowing where they were going, only knowing he would follow because in that moment, she wasn't the galaxy's deadliest warrior. She was someone choosing her own path, and he would fight to protect it with everything he had. Sirens screamed across the station, red lights flashed over metal floors, and soldiers shouted commands into the chaos. Jace followed Thalara through narrow halls, her movements sharp, fast, focused. She knew the station better than anyone she knew, which turns avoided scanners, which elevators had blind spots, and which cameras could be looped. Reached a dark tunnel behind the supply armory, sealed by a coded door. Thalara slammed her palm onto the panel, and the wall split open, revealing a hidden shaft with a ladder dropping into shadows. Go, she said without looking back. Jace climbed down, hands trembling. The ladder felt like it would never end, but he trusted her even now when the whole galaxy wanted them dead. When his boots hit the ground below, she followed, landing beside him without a sound. Her armor hummed faintly, a quiet rhythm that matched his heartbeat. This tunnel leads to the outer dock, she said. Flat transport ship hidden. There are no trackers, low shields enough to reach the edge of the system. Jace nodded, still catching his breath. What about the others? They'll chase you. They won't chase me, she said. Not if they believe I did what they ordered. He looked at her, eyes narrowed. Wait, what are you planning? She didn't answer. Instead, she handed him a new chip. Hide this on yourself. It fakes your life signs, makes you look dead for 3 hours, and we walk out, covered in your blood, and tell them I burned your body, then leave quietly, without a trace. Jace stared at her. Are you serious? She nodded. I have done worse for less. He felt cold, then not from fear of her, but from the sacrifice behind her voice. This isn't right. You can't throw away everything for Mesh. Tilted her head slightly. Everything I was. It's already gone. I just didn't know it. Getuous wanted to say more, but the tunnel trembled. The floor shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. They found us, she said quickly, and pulled him forward. They ran through the tunnel. Lights flickered overhead. Metal groaned. Louder voices echoed from above. To close at the end of the tunnel, a blast door blocked their path. Thalara reached for the panel, but sparks flew as her hand touched it. Someone changed the codes, she growled. They were Tripojus, backed away. Checking his pouch, thinking fast, he remembered the old repair chip she gave him in the beginning, the one with backdoor codes. He plugged it into the panel, fingers flying. The system blinked once, twice, then the door slid open. Just enough. Go, she pushed him through, but a noise behind made them both stop. A shadow moved at the far end of the tunnel. Someone had followed them, not many, just one, but fast and quiet. Thalara stepped in front of Jace, drawing a short blade from her thigh. She didn't speak. Her breath calmed. The attacker lunged from the dark armor, black visor, down. A silent assassin built to kill. Their blades clashed once, then twice, then Thalara struck low and fast, breaking the rhythm, sending the attacker crashing into the wall. With a loud crunch, no time to check if they were dead, she grabbed Jace and they ran into the docking bath. Ship sat ready, just as she promised, small but sleek lights blinking. She opened the hatch and shoved him inside. You fly, she said. Wait, what about you? I need to cover the launch. They'll fire if they see both of us. Liv. Jace shook his head. No way. I'm not leaving. You. She grabbed his shirt, pulled him close and whispered, if you stay, I die. If you leave, I might live. Their eyes locked again. Jace saw it, the same look she gave him after the slap pain, hidden under command, fire under ice. He swallowed hard, then nodded slowly. Promise. You'll follow Mesh. Pressed her forehead to his just for a second, and whispered, I will. Then she pushed him into the seat, slammed the hatch, and vanished back into the dark. Jace stared through the window, his hands shaking as he launched it. Ship lifted engines, roared alarms, screamed behind him. He saw flashes of light from the tunnel. Gun flew, blind, heart pounding every second, waiting for her signal. But it never came. Only silent stars passed by one after another, and still no sin. He sat alone in the cockpit, eyes wide, searching for her. Ship. The comms crackled once, with static, then Jace closed his eyes, hands tight on the controls. The strongest warrior in the galaxy had vanished into fire for a man who once told her she had beautiful eyes, and now he didn't know if she was still alive, or if he had just left behind the only person who ever saw him as more than just human. The cell was cold and silent, with nothing but steel walls and blinking red lights. Jace sat on the bench, his wrists cuffed, his back aching from the hard landing. Hours ago, or maybe days ago, he no longer knew the time he had been caught. Just as he reached the edge of the neutral zone, his ship disabled by a silent missile, pulled in by tractor beam, and dragged through a maze of warships. No one spoke to him during the capture. No trial, no questions, just chains and silence, until they brought him here. Then the voice came through the speaker, cold and sharp. You are to stand trial by combat in the arena of Dementis. Stood slowly, heart-pounding combat against Hutha. Voice did not answer. The door opened, and guards in red armor marched in, pulling him by the arms and dragging him through dark halls, each step echoing like thunder in his ears. They threw him into the center of the arena and sealed the gates behind him. Jace looked up, blinking under the harsh white light. The stands were filled with silent faces, commanders, officers, diplomats from across the galaxy, all watching him like an insect under glass. Ground below his boots was rough dust and blood, old stains, and broken stone. He turned in a slow circle, trying to steady his breath. No weapon, no shield, nothing but his bare hands. Horns sounded, and a door across the arena slid open. For a moment he saw only shadow, then she stepped out, Lara-clad in black armor, with a new mark on her shoulder, the mark of those who served high command. Her helmet was off her face, cold eyes locked on him. No emotion, no warmth, no memoria. Jace stepped back, his throat dry. Thalares said nothing. He raised his hands, palms open. No tricks, no fear. You don't have to do this, he said. Still no answer. The crowd waited for blood. She drew her blood. Jace didn't move. He just stared at her, searching her face for anything that felt like her, but all he saw was steel. They told you to finish what he started, didn't they? Her blade hummed with energy. He stepped forward slowly. If this is really who you are, then do it. But if there's even a part of you that remembers who I am, then don't. For a second nothing moved. Then she closed his eyes, bracing for pain, but it never came. The blade stopped at his throat, not cutting, not moving. He opened his eyes and saw her face trembling, just barely. Then the blade dropped from her hand and clattered to the ground. I remember, she whispered. Gasps rose from the crowd. Guards moved at once, weapons drawn. Thalara turned on them before they reached the floor, her body a blur, her fists breaking metal, her boots crushing. Jace scrambled to grab the fallen blade and fought back beside her, ducking, swinging, dodging with every ounce of strength he had. The arena became a war zone. She covered him like a shield, never letting any strike reach him. Her eyes sharp, her mouth tight with fury. They fought their way through the guard line and reached the side gate, but more soldiers poured in. We won't make it, Jace shouted. Thalara pulled him behind a shattered column. Her armor cracked, her arm bleeding, but her voice was strong. We will. She reached into a belt and pulled out a small device. It's beacon. I stole it from their command ship. It calls for extraction. Who's coming for us? Anyone brave enough to stand against them, she said. Jace looked up through the smoke and fire. Above the arena dome, ships began to appear, dark shapes rising from the horizon, fast and angry rebels, outcasts, others who had once been broken like Thalara, now rising because of her. The beacon pulsed brighter than the wall. Exploded dust filled the air, and rebel troops stormed the arena, weapons blazing, pulling Thalara and Jace to safety. As they lifted off, the arena shrank below them, fire swallowing the floor that once demanded blood. Thalara sat beside Jace, her breath shaking, her hand gripping his. You were supposed to die in that place, she said quietly. So were you. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then she said, thank you for not running. He squeezed her hand. You slapped me. Remember, I had to see how the story ended. Now it wasn't over, it had just begun. The rebel ship drifted through a field of shattered satellites, its lights dim, its engines humming low inside the medical bay. Jace sat beside Thalara as machines scanned her injuries. Soft beeps filled the air, but his eyes stayed on her, not the wounds, not the armor, just her. She looked tired, more than he had ever seen her, her shoulders slack, her eyes half closed. Yet even now she held herself like a warrior, one who had survived everything thrown at her. Should rest, he said, gently. She turned to him slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I am not used to Restindual. Learn, he said with a small smile, and she didn't argue. The door slid open, and a tall rebel commander stepped in with gray skin and heavy scars. His eyes scanned Thalara, then Jace, then back to Thalara again. You really walked out on them for a human. She said nothing, just sat taller, her jaw firmed up. Commander nodded slowly. We didn't believe the signal. At first thought it was bait, but then we saw the data. Crystal, your message went viral. Underground networks across 3 systems. Already call you the warrior. Who turned Athelara blinked once the name, hitting her like a wave. We LL protect you, the commander added, but you need to know what comes next. Raised her eyes. The galaxy wants your blood. Your former command declared you rogue, put a bounty on you and the human, both dead or alive. Jace gave a low whistle. I'm flattered. Thalra looked at the commander and asked, who still stands with you? Gave a thin smile. More than you'd expect. Some want justice, others just want hope, but they all see what you did in the arena. They see someone who could have killed and didn't, someone who chose life over fear after. The commander left the room. Jace turned to her again. You know, you didn't have to do all this. I did, she said softly, because you saw me not as a monster, not as a weapon. You gave me something they never did. What's take choice? Silence fell again, but this time it was warm, not empty. Later the ship landed on a hidden moon base, carved deep into the stone, surrounded by mist and silence. Here rebels gathered, repairing ships, storing weapons, and for once speaking with laughter instead of fear. Jace and Thalara walked through the base together, and for the first time no one looked at her with terror, only respect. Children peeked around corners watching her with wide eyes. One even ran up to her holding a broken toy and asked, can you fix it? Thalara knelt down and gently took the toy in her hands. It's missing a stabilizer, she said without thinking, and the child giggled. Jace watched the moment unfold, and something deep in his chest shifted. Later that night, under the stars, Jace and Thalara stood outside the base. On a quiet cliff above the valley below, lights flickered across the land like tiny stars caught on the ground. She said, I never thought I'd see the stars without a mission, without a target hand. Now, I don't know what comes next. Jace smiled and stepped closer. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. She looked at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then said, when you first spoke to me, I thought you were foolish, maybe even weak-handed. Now I think you're the bravest man I've ever met. He chuckled. I got slapped by a living legend and still stuck around. How brave is that? She laughed quietly, her armor soft in the moonlight. Then something changed in her eyes. She reached up, slowly touched his face where the old bruise had faded, her fingers barely brushing his skin. You never stopped looking at me like I was more than what they made me be. 'Cause you are. She lowered her hand, then reached for his. He held it gently, his thumb tracing the edge of her gauntlet. For a while they stood like that, quiet, hand in hand under a sky full of stars, neither one speaking, because there was no need. At last she spoke again, her voice softer than ever before. I'm still learning how to live without fear, how to trust, how to be more than what they create. You'll figure it out, he said, and I'll be right here when you do. She looked down, then smiled, and just for a second, just a breath, her cheeks turned pink and warm. You made me blush again, she said. Jace grinned, proud of it. She nodded slowly, then leaned closer, her forehead resting against his hand. This time, when her lips touched his, there was no slap, no confusion, no armor between them, just a girl and a man, just 2 people who had survived the worst the galaxy could throw at them and still chose each other in the end.